Great news as Bill Self has been released from the hospital. We're going to get into that, as well as North Carolina to the SEC. What would that mean for Kansas?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks, and thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every one of our shows. One of our bonus episodes did a little KU football fall camp update yesterday as well. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to talk a little on Bill Self being released from the hospital. So good news there. We're also going to get into this report of North Carolina and the SEC, what exactly it would mean for Kansas. Should Kansas try to secure a spot in the SEC? We'll get to all that on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. And take control of your finances with Monarch. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50%. That's half off your first year with Monarch Money. Okay, so Bill Self was officially released from the hospital. This is what was released by Kansas Athletics. He was released from LMH Health. He said, statement from Bill Self, quote, "I want to thank all the amazing doctors and nurses at LMH Health for the excellent care I received during my stay here. I feel strong and am excited to be home. Our team has had a productive summer and look forward to our batteries being recharged and prepping for this upcoming season." It was also kind of talked about, reported, whatever you want to say, that this was indeed heart-related. And then that was something we kind of brought up in the bonus episode. Like, you know, it made sense when you went back to 2023 based on what happened there with the stents going in the heart. I forget if that was one stent at that point going into the heart. It kind of made sense if you connected the dots there, but we needed to at least, you know, in that situation, keep an open mind, because sometimes stents are put in place for different things, right? So it could have been something else. Well, it turns out it is kind of heart related, which I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, because, you know, worse obviously that it already happened, better that it's been taken care of again now, and maybe, I don't know, the more work that's been done on it now, like maybe it's in a proper place. Who knows? That's obviously the hope. And obviously, like I said earlier, when this originally happened, the biggest thing here is with Bill Self, with Sydney, with Tyler, with the family, for them and for Bill Self, like, just you want them to be healthy from that standpoint. That is the most important part out of all of this. Now, as it pertains to the KU side of things, there's just a lot unsaid as part of this. And, I don't really think it's like intentional that there's unsaid stuff. It's just that you don't know. It is the world of the unknown. And so, like, you can't put in a statement like that, "Oh, I plan on coaching the first game for KU basketball," or like, "Well, I might have to miss the first month of the season." One, you're not going to put that in there because A, you don't want to kind of incite panic. But B, you don't probably know. Like, maybe the doctors, tell you, "Hey, you should lower your stress," or like, "This is the normal timetable for recovery from something like this." And then you kind of have an idea. But like with something like this, it's not, "Oh, I broke my arm, I'm out 4 to 6 weeks." Like, it's a very general range of things. This is something different. This is heart related. This, there's a lot of stuff that goes into, like I said, like stress levels and stuff like that. So the left unsaid thing is, will this have an impact? Will he be there for the start of the school year? Will he be there for the start of boot camp? Will he be there for, late night in the fog in the first game of the season? Will he have to miss any time? Will he, this impact his schedule over the course of the season? Will he be able to kind of be there, but he won't be able to, kind of be up and running up and down the court, or, yelling and stuff? He's just going to kind of have to be there and sit and let the assistants do it, and he's just going to have to watch and evaluate. Those are real questions. Or is everything back to normal, right? Is having all these stints in place, is it going to put Bill Self that by the time we get to the start of camp and practice and the season in a few months' time, is everything going to be A-okay, right? And then you obviously have the big question of, okay, if things were eventually A-okay after the 2023 situation, when it happened during the Big 12 tournament, you missed the NCAA tournament. You had all off season to get ready for that next season. This time you don't have all off season, but also it's the idea that did that time between that healing to now, did the continued level of stresses, and this is something I talked about again on the previous episode, that like coaching in college is very stressful. It's not just the scheduling and the practices and the travel and the NIL game and the transfer. There's high school. There's so much going on. It's a constant, there's so much going on each and every one of your days. And so did these last 2 years, did it add back up to where, you end up in a worse situation than you were when you originally had this stint put in place back in 2023? And so then if that becomes a question, then it also gets to the question of like, well, do I want to keep doing this, right? And then you also get to the question of like, okay, do you just try to make it through one more year and that's it? Or do are you able to move past this? And those are questions I don't have. Those are questions that are probably better directed to Bill Self's doctor and to Bill Self and his family. Like those are the ones that matter there. And I don't know that that's something that we're going to get released to us. I also don't think that if this were Bill Self's last year, I don't view him as being somebody like that's going to want a farewell tour. Like that doesn't really rub me Bill Self's way. That I just don't see him being the guy that kind of wants that attention on him. So I guess I would put it this way. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea if he'll be back for the first game or not. Like, hopefully he is. Hopefully everything's good to go. But whether he is fully healthy from here and whether, this process and the healing process comes about that he is going to be good to go, which is obviously the most ideal situation here. Whether that happens and he's able to coach 5 more years or 7 more years, or this is the last year of Bill Self, I would just say if he does work his way back, and again, maybe it is Jock Vaughn or Curtis Townsend for some games or whatever, but if he is able to work himself back and get back to being the head coach this year, just enjoy what you have with Bill Self, right? Because you don't know, right? Like I said, it could be 5 more years. It could be 7, right? That'd be the most ideal situation in the world. But just go into it assuming, or maybe not assuming might be too strong of a word. Just go into it with the expectation that like it could be. And I don't know that that's that different than before this happened anyway. Like you kind of did have to, but now it feels like it is more of a sped up process, more of a okay, this makes even more sense now if this were his last year, because you do have this added element into all of this. So just appreciate what you have when you have it. But obviously good news, he was released from the hospital and sounds like everything went well. Just no idea what the timeline is going to be from here. And obviously the more important part is, I'm sure part of it too is like, okay, how do these next 2 weeks, how does this next month go with the recovery process to kind of find out more down the road? Because it isn't just a simple, you have Tommy John surgery, you're out 9 months, right? It's not that simple. So anyway, there was a report about North Carolina and the SEC, and I think it would be interesting from a Kansas perspective. Let's get to that next. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings plan or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app, too. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And especially like during the summer, man, like I swear, like the costs go up. It could be your air conditioning bill. Like maybe you need to repair your air conditioner just because, you are in the summer month. Maybe you're going on a summer vacation. Like that's going to be expensive with hotels and rental car and travel and buying food somewhere. And maybe, I don't know, there's just a lot going on in the summer, man, that takes money, especially with how hot it is. It's like, oh, what are we going to do today? Oh, let's just go to the movies. Boom, there's money too, right? And that's the beauty of Monarch Money. You take control of your finances. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with Monarch Money. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Don't forget you can check our KU football fall camp week 1 kind of recap takeaways on a bonus episode from yesterday. And don't forget, too, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for your second listen every day as well. Okay, so there was a report. It kind of went around on like headlines. Like for like On3 is really good about just like posting a graphic with like a small headline that makes it look like it's very like, I don't know, lack of a better term, clickbaity, but it gets the job done for them. But anyway, Here's what the tweet said. I guess we are going with the On3 one. Report, North Carolina is exploring a potential move from the ACC to the SEC, per Inside Carolina. Now, Inside Carolina is the, I don't know if it's 24/7 affiliated, but it's like, I think it's the biggest of the like North Carolina, like, websites that does a lot of reporting and stuff like that. And it's funny because that was the headline. Like On3 wasn't the only one who kind of ran with it and took it that way. Like there were a lot of other people that kind of took it that way. I will say the sexy headline isn't exactly how the article reads. Like this is the article exactly from Inside Carolina. It says, I'm going to pull exactly from kind of toward the end here. Make no mistake now, multiple sources told Inside Carolina, the SEC is where the Tar Heels are aiming under the leadership of Roberts and Newmark should UNC move to leave the ACC for another league, perhaps in the near future. Sources said the 2030-31 school year, when the ACC's decreasing exit fees dip from $93 million to the flat $75 million threshold, would figure to become an important final line of demarcation if the Tar Heels haven't made their departure sooner. 7 decades ago, UNC was one of the original members of the 1953 founding of the ACC. Quietly, Roberts, the UNC chancellor, who spent 30 years working in finance, got involved behind the scenes and performed a key role in helping finalize the ACC's settlement agreements with Clemson and Florida State, sources told Inside Carolina. So it kind of details the idea that, like, this is what North Carolina wants to do. What it does not detail in there is that this is a mutual thing, that it is the SEC wanting North Carolina. This sounds like it is North Carolina saying, hey, we want to get ourselves to a position that we would love to eventually leave for the SEC. Now, you could maybe make the argument that maybe there have been behind closed door conversation. If that is the goal for North Carolina, would you set a goal that, like, it's not one, like, it's one thing to be like, oh, my goal is to lose 20 pounds, because you can control how you eat, how you exercise to try to lose those 20 pounds. It's another thing for me to be like, my goal is to grow a third arm. And it's like, well, I can't really control if I grow a third arm. Like, I'm going to need a doctor to approve this and be willing to do the surgery. And this is going to be experimental surgery. And they're going to have to be on board. Like, it's not just my decision. It's somebody else's decision too. And that's kind of what this is for North Carolina. It's like, okay, if this is really a goal, have you been told back channeling or behind closed doors that this is something the SEC might be interested in down the road, where now you are making it your goal based on some preliminary conversations that you have? Or is it just trying to get yourself in that best shape possible to, like, if the SEC does add more teams, that you feel like you are on the forefront of doing that? So that's where it kind of becomes interesting. But that's where I would like to insert Kansas into this story of a hypothetical new round of the realignment world, which, it feels like it happens every 5 years, 7 years at this point in time. So, maybe that would be the situation. Because would then the SEC, like, let's say the SEC was interested in taking North Carolina, and that is eventually something, let's say, that would happen. Would then the SEC be interested in taking, say, Duke as well, to say, hey, we have your rival, and even Kansas, right? Because think about this. If you view it this way, if you're the SEC, you could view it as like, okay, listen, we already have the best football schools, or not all of them, right? You still have Ohio State and Michigan and some of these other schools, Penn State, right? Oregon, that are in the Big Ten. So not all of them, but we still, we have things covered with, like, that top tier of football school. We have Alabama, we have Georgia, we have Oklahoma, we have Texas, we have Florida, right? Like, you have all these big schools. We still survive with doing that, with having, your Vanderbilts and your Mississippi States of the world. So, like, we add Duke and Kansas and North Carolina. Sure, maybe they're not Alabama and Georgia, and football is what drives this and stuff. But, like, we're kind of covered there in general. But now if we added Kansas, Duke, and North Carolina, we would literally have the 4 biggest blue bloods in our conference. If you want to say UCLA with the most titles, like, whatever. But for relevancy right now, you would literally have, at that point, if you did that, you added North Carolina, and then you said, hey, let's also add their rival in Duke. You'd have Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke. And then you're just like, oh, hey, what about Kansas? Then we could have all 4 of the biggest blue bloods available. Now, again, would the SEC actually be interested in Kansas? Probably just depends. If you're talking about that idea that I just said, where it's like you could have a monopoly on the biggest blue bloods and what that would mean for college basketball, especially when you're already covered in college football, then of course. But if you're looking at it from a perspective of, a team with a big national brand who makes good revenue, has an emerging football team and stadium with an elite basketball blueprint, like, there are other reasons it makes sense too, right? Now, if you're looking at it from a perspective of football value and just that alone, it doesn't make as much sense as the SEC going for probably some other schools that would be higher on the list at that point in time. So it just kind of depends what they're looking for. But for instance, Kansas Duke from this past November that was played in Vegas, that drew 2 million viewers. Missouri, Iowa, which was a bowl game, which involves obviously Missouri, part of the SEC, drew 2.8 million. And Missouri is a team that the SEC took for football, right? And obviously still the football numbers are better there, but like that, and it's also incongruent. But point being, if you have KU, Duke, North Carolina, and Kentucky in the same conference, how many college basketball games are you going to get over that season? Like, you could theoretically work it so that they all have a home and home with each other every year in the conference schedule, or at the very least, maybe, North Carolina and Duke have a home and home, maybe Kansas and Kentucky have a home and home every year. And then you play one of Duke or North Carolina one other time that given season, right? And then you have, what would that be? That would be 4 games for each of the Blue Bloods at that point in time against another, one of the Blue Bloods. And so that's like adding extra inventory to the conference to be like, hey, listen, we have all these extra games. We have these 12 extra games between Blue Bloods we're going to play that's similar to a slate of like mid-tier bowl games that we're going to be able to add to our revenue. So it doesn't move the needle as much as, adding Texas or Oklahoma, but it still can move the needle a little bit. And while the SEC kind of has control of football along with the Big Ten, it would give them a huge surge in the basketball game as well. And then, of course, you would also have what would make sense would be like, okay, hey, if we're adding North Carolina, let's add Duke to be their rival. Hey, we already have Kansas's rival in the conference. That makes things even easier and an even, easier addition from that standpoint, right? And so, of course, if you remember last offseason, there were, I think, unsubstantiated would be the way to put it, like rumors of Kansas and the SEC flirting. I forget who was going on about it, but like, again, those are just rumors. I don't know that I buy into those much, but like, at the very least, like maybe you could connect some dots at least a little bit here. So next segment, let's kind of compare and contrast, because if there is interest from the SEC in North Carolina, I kind of want to compare and contrast what is the case for North Carolina versus what is the case for Kansas. Let's get to that next. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks, which is brought to you by Game Time. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. How about that? And you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. You can also, obviously, go to sporting events with Game Time, right? I'm looking at Kansas City Royals tickets right now. You can see them play the Braves on Wednesday at 1:10. If you can, maybe take off, maybe play a little hooky from work. It's 2000's trucker hat giveaway day too. And you can get in on Game Time, right? I toggle my include fees, so I'm not surprised to check out $14 just to get in. Now, if I want to sit like really good seats, I can sit section 126, which is pretty close to behind home plate. Row L Diamond Club seats for $116. Go have a hoot. Have fun on a Wednesday. Again, don't tell your boss I said this, but, maybe play a day of hooky and maybe take your kid or something. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or sports tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks again for joining us. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball for a second listen every day. Okay, so talking a little bit about this report, like again, North Carolina, SEC, what would it mean for Kansas? Could Kansas, wiggle their way in from what point in time? So if we compare North Carolina, what they bring to the table as a possible expansion candidate to Kansas, because again, while this report doesn't really make it clear if the offer is up to UNC or if they're the ones initiating and trying to make it work, if this is something that the SEC would allow or would want, then it would only make sense to say, okay, how does KU measure up to North Carolina in some of these ways that would gauge SEC interest? Okay, let's talk football stadium. North Carolina holds 63,000. Kansas, it sounds like the floating number from Travis Goff is one that could shift, but it sounds like the most recent comment was high 40s. So that would be a check mark for North Carolina, bigger football stadium. Now, if you're talking who has the newer stadium or the more vamped up stadium. I mean, Kansas is obviously going to be the check mark there. North Carolina usually renovates theirs if you go look like every couple of years though. So it's probably, pretty good there, but Kansas is going to have like state of the art, like brand new, right? Now, what about football history? I think North Carolina's had a much higher floor as a football program historically than Kansas. UNC has 37 bowl appearances. Kansas has 14. So that's like a very big difference there in your floor, your average season. North Carolina has a career 55% winning percentage. Kansas is 47%. So obviously there's edges there to North Carolina. But honestly, there's some similar ceilings. Now, North Carolina has accessed their ceiling more often. North Carolina has 8 seasons of 10 or more wins. Kansas only has 3. But if we're talking like ultimate ceiling outcome, North Carolina has 8 conference titles, but they haven't won one in 45 years. Kansas has 6 conference titles. They haven't won one in 57 years. North Carolina has 15 consensus All-Americans. Kansas has 13. North Carolina has a max of 11 wins with a handful of, BCS, New Year's Six, whatever you want to call the modern version of that, appearances. Kansas doesn't have a bunch of appearances. They have a couple in the Orange Bowl. But they have a max of 12 wins, which is one more than North Carolina, and they do have an Orange Bowl win. I don't think Carolina's ever won one of their, BCS bowls. So actually, the very ceiling outcome is there. North Carolina gets to it a little bit more often and has a higher floor as well. Like North Carolina's been the better football program. I think you would say pretty, consistently there. But what about revenue through the athletic department? So in 2023, North Carolina came in 33rd in the country with 139 million total in athletic revenue. In 2023, Kansas was 36th, so 33rd to 36th with 128 million total. So that's very close between the two. Now in 2024, North Carolina came in 32nd with 122 million total, Kansas in 35th at 118 million total. So you're talking about both these schools being on the same tier, being very much within striking distance of each other in terms of the revenue. So if you're comfortable adding North Carolina, you're getting similar stuff there from Kansas. This is the one that I think is really interesting and starts to sway the conversation in Kansas's way. It's the TV viewership. And I'm not even talking college basketball. Now, North Carolina is a blue blood too, so it's like they're going to get really good viewership in college basketball. I'm talking college football TV viewership numbers. This is just based on this past year. I would have to go back and probably look at, even more numbers to get a better sample size and probably a better argument here. But just for the sake of this, based on 2024 numbers, this is via sportsmediawatch.com. And then it was compiled together by Reddit user TMart12 for all the games that were rated and then averaged out. So North Carolina actually was only on 4 rated games, which Kansas was on 9 to begin with. So you could make the argument that like that in its own, the Kansas is on 9 rated games, North Carolina was 4. Like that might speak to it a little bit. Part of that, though, is probably just the crummy media deal that the ACC is in, where like a lot of those games are ending up on like the ACC network or like streamed on ESPN Plus. Whereas the Kansas, it's just a few of them every year. So that could be part of that. But forget that. Let's just talk the total numbers of viewers and the average per game. North Carolina, in those 4 rated college football games they played in 2024, they had 2.1 million total viewers. They averaged out 526,000 people per game that they had on rated television. For Kansas in 2024, and again, this was a 5-7 Kansas team, they had about a total of 13 million viewers over their 9 rated games. That's an average of 1.516 million viewers per rated game. So that is triple, basically, what North Carolina is doing, and that's college football. To be fair, though, Kansas did have the luxury of playing Colorado, and the Deion Sanders effect is real. That was 6 million views for the KU Colorado game. So that's a huge chunk of those numbers for Kansas. But even if we take out that game, even if we take out the KU Colorado game, we wind up with Kansas in the other 8 rated games having 7.4 million viewers total, which averages out to about 930,000 per rated game. That is still almost doubling North Carolina's rating footprint from last season. So that is actually a big check in the way of Kansas. If we're talking value, CNBC ranked the top 75 most valuable college sports programs. That's across, your entire athletic department. That was in December of 2024. North Carolina came in at 40th with 539 million in valuation. Kansas came in 37th with 553 million in valuation. So if you're talking football history or stadium, probably still a slight check mark, for North Carolina. It certainly would in history. Kansas, though, with the valuation and the money, it's about even between the two. And then the viewership was actually in favor of Kansas. So point being, if the SEC is serious about adding North Carolina, Kansas should try to get, in on it too, and pitching that idea. So should Duke, to be like, hey, you guys have football. We can have a monopoly on basketball if we have the 4 biggest blue bloods in the sport. So anyway, just an interesting thought. Maybe not something that comes around for 5 years. And who knows if it's something Kansas is even interested in. I think that they should be if that option were on the table. But anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Tomorrow, Phil Steele Magazine, can help us preview the KU football season. So don't want to miss that one. Make sure you subscribe to the show and see you next time on that edition of Locked On Jayhawks.